What was your breaking point where you snapped at a rude customer? I offered a very minor celebrity in the UK who was in town to do a pantomime a store card that we have to offer everyone. And his response was, "I don't need 5 off. I could pay your wages for 10 years from one job. Don't you know who I am?" So I decided to lie. Not a clue. I then called my boss, who I knew didn't watch any soaps, on the tannoy and asked him if he knew said celeb. He said, "Sorry, no." Should I? Then I asked the customer behind him, who said no. Mainly she was just getting involved, or she genuinely didn't know. I have no idea. But that lady was a legend. Then he said, "Sam Kane? Brookside? Coronation Street?" I finished with nope. "Still don't know you. So you sure you don't want to take advantage of the 5 discount? It means you save £3.55. He walked out. My manager complimented me on my store card pitch. It was a good afternoon.
That story is pretty funny. It's wild how some people think being famous makes them special everywhere. The guy was just trying too hard to show off. I like how you handled it though. Ignoring his ego and bringing in your boss was a solid move. And the customer chiming in really added to it. In the end, you got the last laugh with that discount line. Sounds like a memorable shift.
I worked retail when I was in college. A customer came to my till, and one of the products he had was a large version of a chocolate bar. I scanned it, and he started giving me shit because the price was wrong. I knew the price wasn't wrong because I enjoy this particular chocolate and bought it all the time. He walked me down to the shelf where it was and pointed out the price tag. I told him that's the wrong price tag. It was for regular size, not large. He asked me, "Are you fucking blind?" I responded with, "Yes, actually, I'm blind in one eye, but I can still see that this price tag is for a regular size bar and not large. Look at the small letters under the price." He immediately turned nice and bought me a chocolate bar. But screw retail. Never doing that again.
That sounds like a wild retail moment. It's funny how quickly people switch from confrontational to nice when you hit them with something unexpected. That guy probably didn't expect you to throw in a personal detail like being blind in one eye. Retail can definitely be tough. I get why you'd steer clear of it after experiences like that. At least you got a chocolate bar out of it.
I used to work at a Starbucks in an area where NFL owners, professional athletes, and alike lived. One of our regulars was some guy who had spent his life wallowing in orange spray tan and had the whitest hair one could imagine. Every day he would come in and order a green tea, literally a tea bag with hot water. No matter what, there was always something wrong with it. Too hot, too cold, cup was weird, whatever. Anyway, one day during my last 2 weeks, this guy comes in when we're being slammed. He orders, and I call out green tea latte for X. Notice I did not say green tea. He comes up and snaps, "Excuse me, it was a green tea. It's literally water in a tea bag. How stupid can you be?" I turn toward him, look him dead in the eye, and loudly go, "That's not even your fucking order. Every time you come in here, it's something else. If we're so stupid, then go to another location." He stepped back and didn't say anything after that.
I used to work at a coffee shop where we had this regular who was super picky. He always ordered a simple drink, but somehow, there was always an issue. One day, during a really busy shift, I called out his order wrong. He snapped at me about it, and I just lost it. Told him his order was always different anyway, and if he thought we were that bad, he could just go somewhere else. He just walked away.
Work fast food, customer returned fries because they wanted salt-free. So I put down another batch, waited, took them up, and brought them to the customer, salt-free. 2 minutes later they come back and flip major shit, saying they're still too salty. I didn't lose my shit, but my manager behind the counter didn't take too kindly and kicked him out of the store. Felt good.
That sounds pretty frustrating. It's wild how some customers can be so particular. I've had a similar experience where no matter what you do, it's never right for them. It's nice your manager had your back. Sometimes you just have to roll with it, and not let their mood get to you. It's part of the job, I guess. It's good when the team stands together.
A telemarketer called me at IT and insisted to talk to my client services manager to send us an information packet on flash storage. I told him we are not interested. He then said, "Sir, seeing as you are not the client services manager, you are not authorized to make decisions." Yeah, I went off on him a bit.
It's interesting how sometimes people just don't get the situation. I had a similar call where a telemarketer wouldn't take no for an answer. I ended up just hanging up after trying to explain we weren't interested. It's kind of annoying when they assume they know more about your job than you do. I guess it's just part of the job sometimes.
Lifeguard here. A woman tried to get me fired by making up a story about how I'm a terrible lifeguard because I refused to save a drowning kid. She claimed she was begging me to save him. When I found out this was the same woman that tried to get my coworker fired because she thought my coworker refused to administer aid to child who was clearly choking when he was clearly breathing, I kicked that woman out of the park. Literally. Edit. This woman was also extremely aggressive and confrontational with the staff, but really nice to our manager. She also claimed to be a paramedic, and she believes that she knows better than all the lifeguards. Edit 2. There's more to the story about why that woman tried to get me fired, but you can ask if you want it, but it's a long one.
That sounds like a pretty intense situation. Dealing with someone aggressive like that must have been tough, especially in a role where people look to you for safety. It's wild how some folks think they know better, claiming to be professionals in emergencies. Good call on stepping in and protecting your team. Sounds like you handled it well, even if it was a lot to deal with at the moment.
I worked service for years. Now that I have an office job, one of my great pleasure in life is calling out fellow customers. My best was when I was in Whole Foods and a super rich looking old guy was going absolutely sick house on the poor butcher. This guy was unhinged. Spit was flying out of his mouth as he screamed some nonsense about organic chicken. In a moment of perfect timing that will never be repeated, because I usually think of things like this a half hour later, I put on my best kind concerned lady face and sidle up to him. I asked him if he was okay and if I needed to find his caretaker. Bastard went into vapor lock and huffed right out of there. My theory is that if you're a grown-ass person and acting like a mental patient, I will treat you like one. I live for days like this.
I used to work in retail too. You see all kinds of people, some are just unreasonable. One time, a customer was yelling at a cashier over a price mistake. I was in line, and I finally just said, "You know it happens, right?" It surprised him, and he calmed down. Sometimes, you just have to call out the craziness. It makes for some interesting moments at work.
Coworker had her teeth knocked out by a drunk, and some customers were making fun of her and the way she was talking. Found her crying in the back. Gave her a hug and handed her my apron. That's the last thing I remember, but apparently I took a bus tub to their table and in one motion swept everything off the table into it while they were eating. Told them their tab was taken care of and not to come back.
That's a tough situation. It's wild how some people can be so cruel. What you did for your coworker shows a lot of character. It's good you stood up for her. Those customers definitely deserve that. Noticing someone in pain and taking action speaks volumes about you. Sometimes, people don't realize the impact their words have until someone calls them out. Glad you had her back in that moment.
Worked at a doggy daycare in Orange County. Daycare room was off limits to customers. We would meet them outside in the retail part of the store. This one lady, who looked like a real housewives reject, would come into the daycare room time and time again, despite telling her that the daycare room was off limits. Finally, one day I said, fairly politely, "Ma'am, we cannot allow customers in this room. It is employees only." She stormed out, driving away. I tried calling her, and she refused to answer. The manager called, and she finally agreed to grace us with her patronage for a few free days of daycare. The manager that got a hold of her petition pretty hard to get me fired for the rest of the time I worked there. I feel like I was painted into a corner since I wasn't allowed to tell customers to leave, but also couldn't allow them to be in the room. Pretty lame.
That sounds like a tough situation. It's frustrating when people don't respect boundaries, especially in a job where you're trying to keep everything professional. It seems like the lady just wanted to get her way, and your manager didn't help either. I get it though. It's a challenging spot to be in when the rules conflict with customer expectations. It must have felt pretty unfair to you in the end.
I work in a pharmacy, and where I live, no one treats us as humans. I just came back from lunch, and this guy evidently had came by while I was at lunch because he asked, "Just came back from lunch?" "Yep. Wagaha lunch." In the tone where it was wrong for me to go for lunch. I mean, who are you to deprive me of my basic rights? I smiled a little poisonously at him and replied, "Yeah, of course, I'm human too." That shut him right up.
It's odd how people forget you're a person when you're in a certain job. I get it, they want their meds and don't think twice. Still, taking a break is basic. That guy's tone was annoying, like he had the right to judge. Your response was spot on. Sometimes, just reminding people you're human is enough to make them think twice about what they say. People need to learn that basic respect goes both ways.
Didn't really snap too much, but I deliver food, and there's a customer who regularly orders delivery, usually once or twice a week. I've probably delivered to this dickhead's house 100 times, and every time I do, he tells me how he was a little short on cash and needed to pay an exact change, and "I'll get you next time." Well, the last time he told me he couldn't tip, I just blurted out, "I'm used to it." If you can afford to get food delivered to your house regularly, you can afford to leave a tip.
I hear you. It's frustrating when people take advantage of you like that. Delivering food can be pretty thankless at times, especially when customers make excuses. Sounds like this guy has no respect for the effort you put in. It's reasonable to expect a tip if they can afford delivery. Sometimes you just have to speak up, even if it feels awkward. It's all part of the job, I guess.
I was a sailing instructor. My student was the most annoying little shit of the group. He was put on my boat because I have the longest fuses when it comes to dealing with little shits. During attack, he accidentally punched me in the nose, which caused me to lift my head up and get hit by the boom. He just sat there and laughed at me. I couldn't control myself. First time in my life, I picked him up and threw him as far as I could. I quickly regained control of myself and sailed over to pick him up. He loved every second of it.
It's funny how kids can push your buttons. This kid managed to hit you not once but twice in one go. You must have been really annoyed at first, but then you just tossed him. Sounds like he got a kick out of it though. At least it ended up being a memorable lesson for both of you. Kids really do know how to keep things interesting, don't they?
Years ago, as a waitress, this regular customer, a guy in his 70s, used to grab the girls' behinds as they served near him or as they wiped tables. He did it to me once, so I rounded on him in fury and told him he'd better never touch us again or he'd regret it. He clearly didn't believe me and grabbed another waitress the next week. The next time he came in, I opted to serve him. I made his pot of coffee super hot, and just as I leant forward to place it on the table, I happened to stumble and the pot emptied right into his lap. Oops.
That's a wild story. You handled it well, though. Some people think they can get away with anything, but not everyone will let it slide. I bet that guy didn't come back for a while. It's funny how sometimes a little accident can send a strong message. Makes you realize that being assertive can have its own twists. Just a simple way of standing up for yourself.
This guy came in and stood at the front counter during lunch rush. There was a very defined line where one lady was taking orders and another was putting them together. The guy got all pissed off because no one would take his order. He started cussing out the two girls in the front. I heard what was going on and asked what was going on. She called the two girls names, and I told him that he didn't need to do that. He then threatened to kick my ass. I told him that he was embarrassing himself in front of his child. He then stomped out.
It's just wild how some people act in public. This guy comes in, totally loses it over waiting in line. Like it's a busy place. Instead of being patient, he's yelling at the staff. I stepped in, tried to calm the situation down, but then he goes off threatening me, too. It's crazy how adults sometimes forget they're setting an example for their kids. At least he left, but what a scene.
I have seen my former boss do it. However, she is eloquent. I have seen her nicely, with a sweet smile, berate a table using the utmost of manners, make them feel so ashamed that I get a great tip, and watch as they walk out with their tail tucked between their legs. As she has said before, I can almost curse a table, and they love me for it.
I had a coworker who had that knack too. She could give feedback so diplomatically that people never realized they'd been called out. Once, a difficult customer left the restaurant smiling and tipping generously, completely oblivious to how she had subtly put them in their place. It was impressive to watch. She had this charm that made everything seem justified without coming off as harsh. Just a special skill, I guess.
Very irate customer did not understand that the charger she brought to us, which did not work with her device, was not the correct charger for said device. Me and my manager tried to explain, but she started reaming about how we're trying to rip her off and take her money. I leave to get some equipment, and upon my return the customer said that my manager took her charger, which he did to replace, then said that he stole it from her. I then repeated her exact statement to her, explaining what is going on. She exploded and started making a scene. That's not what I said. I said it was then she yelled, "Are you calling me a liar?" I responded by saying, "Yes, I am," and walked away. She started to flip her shit right when my manager came back. I remember still being able to hear her freaking out all the way from the employee break room. So many props from my coworkers that day.
Sounds like you had a wild day at work. Dealing with difficult customers can be tough. It's frustrating when people don't understand the situation and make a scene. You handled it pretty well though, sticking to your point. Plus, getting support from your coworkers probably made it easier to cope with that stress. It's a reminder that not every customer interaction goes smoothly, but it's part of the job.
I had a lady try to walk out without paying for the copy she made because she didn't have time to stand in line. She accused me of being a racist. I eventually told her to GTFO, which is ironic since that's what she was trying to do. She then said I was going to ring up and send her mail. I picked up her mail and chucked out the front door. I ended up getting fired over this, even though they fucked me by being understaffed on a known busy day. A few months later, the business was seized by a bank because the owners were defrauding investors. P.S. Like 4 PPL that witnessed this stayed in line, and I helped them afterward. One person who walked in mid-fight without context heard me cussing and walked out, emailed the store that she was offended, and that's why I was fired.
This sounds like a pretty wild situation. It's frustrating when people act entitled, especially when you're just trying to do your job. Getting fired over something like that, especially when it wasn't fully your fault, seems unfair. The twist with the business being seized later is somehow fitting. Sometimes, it's like karma takes its time. Those witnesses probably had mixed feelings about what happened, but at least you helped the others who stayed.
I had been helping, or attempting to, someone for about 10 minutes. The entire time, she was completely resistant, refusing to give me any helpful info on what she was looking for, and kept complaining about things like stock, prices, etc., all with a sour attitude, like I was the scum of the earth. Finally, she went off about how horrible the service was here and began to storm away. I had it. I yelled after her. "Ma'am, I've just been trying to help you find what you're looking for. That's all I'm trying to do." She actually turned around and came back to apologize. We then had a discussion like rational adults on what she needed, and I was able to help her. Definitely worth saying something.
It's funny how frustration can flip so quickly. I once helped someone for what felt like forever. They were annoyed and made sure I knew it. Then, out of nowhere, after I finally snapped back, they turned around to apologize. We ended up clearing the air and having a decent chat. Sometimes just saying what's on your mind can change everything. Glad it worked out like that.
I'm a lifeguard, and these two little shits were acting up on purpose. I had to kick them out 2 weeks ago before, and I wasn't dealing with it anymore. I screamed at them to get out of the pool and come with me to the office. Once I was there, they screamed, "You can't keep me here against my will, this is kidnapping." The younger brother proceeded to run to his parents' car, who they had called to come pick them up, and left the younger brother here. We got their real names, and they were then banned permanently from the establishment.
It's funny how kids think they can outsmart the adults. I remember when I was a camp counselor, a couple of kids tried to pull a similar stunt. They thought they could just run off and cause chaos. We ended up having to call their parents too. It's wild what some kids think they can get away with. I guess it's all part of the job, keeping things in line.
I kind of snapped the other day. Escalated complaint call. The conversation was going in circles, and I was having trouble finding a way to end the call. The guy says, "I know you could do what I want. You're just choosing not to. If I could do what you're asking, don't you think I'd have done it to avoid this 23-minute conversation?" Not my proudest moment.
I get that. Sometimes, when calls drag on and you can't see a way out, frustration builds up. It's easy to lose your cool when someone twists your words. That moment of clarity when you finally speak up can feel good, but it also hits you later. We've all had days where we just want to scream into the void. It's part of dealing with people, I guess.
Long story short, I worked at a trolley collection service and was taking my smoke break, and this middle-aged lady, who has been stink-eyeing me for quite some time, comes at me, berating me for not ensuring that the trolleys can be easily taken/dislodged from the trolley bays for usage. Berating ensues whilst I'm smiling, listening and nodding, and continuing my smoking break, and she starts coming up close into my face, spitting poisonous threats. I take a drag exhale and let that puffy gray cloud of smoke exfoliate her face. Manager was understanding, but had to follow procedures and fire me the next day.
That's a wild story. You were just trying to enjoy a break, and this lady comes at you like that. It's pretty low to get all up in your face about trolleys. I guess the smoke cloud was a funny way to respond, even if it cost you your job. The manager had to do what they had to do, but I bet it felt good in the moment.
I was 19 and worked at McDonald's. It had been a weird day already, and during a slow hour, I had maybe 10 or so customers with only 2 counters. A rather old lady entered the restaurant and looked around, the thing you do while you're about to decide. So she didn't actually get to one specific counter like you do if there is no Kang system and you just choose a counter to order from. Then a guy enters the restaurant, knows what he wants to order, and approaches me. I take his order. The old lady then starts screaming how I wouldn't serve her. That's the point where I snapped and yelled back at her for not choosing a counter and just hoping that someone will take her order. She demanded to talk to the manager. She did. Manager just asked me to be more careful the next time. That's it.
Working at McDonald's can bring some strange moments. I remember this one time when an older lady came in, just wandering around, then freaked out because I was serving someone else. I ended up yelling at her after she started shouting at me. The manager got involved but pretty much just told me to chill. It was awkward, but in fast food, you deal with all kinds of customers.
So it's 1 a.m. at night, and I'm about to shut down the store just when this customer brings in a load of stuff to check out. I was cool with it until he messed up the order. At that point, I was really confused as to what to do since there were no managers on duty, and I was still sort of new. The customer then berated me and accused me of discriminating against him and that I just wanted to go home quickly. He pulled out a recorder too. I snapped for the first time on the job, but he cut me off every time. Apparently, the lawyer activist customer was also late for an appointment. Mind you, this is way past midnight. I finally got him out of the store an hour after we were supposed to close, and I wrote a note mentioning the incident to my manager.
That sounds like a tough shift. It's frustrating when customers just don't get it. You're trying to wrap things up, and then they complicate it all. It's wild how people can turn simple situations into something heated. Dealing with someone like that must have been exhausting, especially late at night. At least you handled it as best as you could and informed your manager. Sometimes those experiences just teach you how to handle things better next time.
When she grabbed my shirt and drugged me across store to show me the price of something after I got back from price check. She went off on me, saying how I switched the signs when I checked moments before. I just said, "Lady, this isn't even my department, okay? I don't price this crap, I just bag it."
So, I was just doing my job, right? And this lady pulls me over to vent about prices. Totally not my deal. I tried to stay calm and just pointed out that I'm not responsible for pricing. You know how some people get worked up over little things. It's a retail life thing. Just frustrating when you get dragged into someone else's problem. Just trying to get through my shift.
Having been a low-level retail manager a few times, I can tell you that I put up with a lot more when it's said to me than when it's said to my employees, or even just my coworkers. I have completely gone off with, "You will not speak to my employees that way," and "I'm going to have to ask you to leave now, sir or ma'am."
I get that. I've been in retail too, and some customers have no clue how they come off. I had a guy berate my coworker over a simple return. I stepped in and said something similar. It's strange how some think they can treat others poorly without consequences. You have to draw a line, especially when it's not just about you anymore, it's about the whole team.
Aman. While I was at university, I used to work in a fast food restaurant between semesters. Overall, I did about 4 years on off and took a lot of shit as a result. Cue my final ever week in that place. I was on the cusp of handing in my dissertation and getting my degree. So this guy comes in and off the bat is rude to me. He then demands he has onion rings instead of fries and kicks off when I tell him we can't. My manager backs me up and he orders just the meal. I get it all together, and when I put on the counter, he asks if the onion rings are in there. I explain he didn't order them, and he goes ballistic. Start calling me a stupid fucking fast food worker, and said I was never going to make anything of my life and be stuck here forever. I literally smacked his meal onto the floor, looked at him, sarcastically went whoops, and walked off. Left him yelling at my back, and my manager had to sort it all out. They didn't do anything because they knew he was rude to me, and also I was gone by the week's end anyway.
That sounds pretty rough. Dealing with rude customers is never easy. I had a similar experience once working in retail. A guy came in mad about a return policy and started yelling at me. I just stood there, took it, and stayed calm. Eventually, he walked out, and I felt kind of relieved. Sometimes it's those moments that test your patience. But in the end, it's just a job. We move on.
A friend of mine is a brand manager for Domino's. A customer from a large advertising agency kept rambling about how his prices were too expensive, trying to school him in pricing models. After he got his team involved, my friend let them know that not only did he record most of the arrogant ramble, but also that he was blacklisting the agency and removing them as a service provider.
That's an interesting situation. Your friend really handled it well. It's not easy dealing with someone who thinks they know better, especially when they go on like that. Recording the conversation was smart, too. Pulling their agency as a service provider seems like a big move, but sometimes you just have to cut ties with people who don't respect your business. Good for him for standing his ground.
Suncoast is manager. Lady had come the day before and was extremely rude, looking for the Wizard of Oz on VHS. Complained about outprices and declared everyone who shopped there to be idiots despite the fact we actually had what she was looking for and were located in a mall. Next day she's back, VHS tape opened and watched, and demanding a refund because she found it at a different Walmart. I said enough was enough and told her that she'd insulted everyone who works or shops there, and out policy states open product can only be replaced. Then I refunded her money anyway and banned her from my store. It felt very good.
That sounds like a rough day at work. Dealing with rude customers can be frustrating, especially when they're confrontational over something so simple. You handled it well by sticking to the policy but also giving her a refund. Banning someone like that probably felt satisfying. It's nice to stand your ground sometimes, especially when you've dealt with disrespect. Just another day in retail, right?
It is astounding to me how many customers don't realize customer is always right is a sarcastic saying, meaning you kiss their ass to get the sale. It doesn't empower the customer, it pokes fun at them. In fact, more often than not, I'd say 99% of the cases, the person who has been trained to sell the product to customer is thinking of buying is more likely always right.
I get what you mean. I worked in retail too, and a lot of customers think their opinion is gold. They forget that salespeople know the products inside and out. It's like they don't see the hard work behind the scenes. But at the end of the day, you just have to smile, nod, and help them walk out with whatever they think they need. It can be exhausting sometimes.
I was a bartender for a few years and always believed that the customer was never right. If I am out and see someone being a dick to the bartender, I usually look at the bartender or a friend and loudly say, just remember, the customer is never right. Never really causes any real commotion, but usually the person getting shit on cracks a smile and it relieves tension. Customers are assholes.
It's true, bartending can bring out the worst in people. I guess standing up for the staff is a small way to show support. It's interesting how a simple comment can change the mood. You see people behaving badly, but sometimes they just need a reminder that everyone deserves respect. It's like a little reality check, and it can break the ice. Just glad to see the bartenders appreciated it.
I've done similar. I work in sales/customer service over the phone, and the following happens shockingly pretty often. Customer will ring in too late to order something and the item sold out. Well, I'll just never order with you again. Okay, I'll just disable your account with us. It'll just take me a moment. No, that's okay.
I get that. A friend of mine works in retail and has dealt with similar situations. Customers often expect everything to be available at their convenience. When something isn't, it's like they forget reality. One time, a customer threatened to never shop there again. The friend shrugged and started the account cancellation process. Suddenly, the customer backtracked, realizing they actually needed what they were hoping to buy. It's wild how quickly that changes.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.